Welcome to the Adventure Pro podcast. Interviews, stories and inspiration from amazing people that have made adventure their business. Belinda, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the Adventure Pro podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe something that people don't know about you?
Oh, that's a good question. It's lovely to be here, Tom, and lovely to be in touch with you after so many years. I don't know where to begin. I love adventure. Adventure's always been a very essential part of my life. And I'm lucky that I've always been able to work in adventure. I very early on worked out that if I worked in another industry, in another job, I would have to save up and I'd only have so much time that I could go adventuring. Whereas if I could work in adventure, then I could be doing it all the time, or most of the time. So for about 20 odd years, I was leading international expeditions with brilliant organisations like BES and Raleigh and wonderful organisations like that. I also worked for a long time doing taking TV crews in and out of exotic places, dangerous places. Expedition leadership skills transfer very well to getting film crews in and out of places. And about 14 years ago, I set up Explorers Connect because what I'd seen for 20 odd years of leading groups is that adventure is really important and really underrated and really undervalued. And I'd seen it change people's lives for the better, all sorts of people from all sorts of backgrounds. And I just really wanted to promote adventure in a different way, in a way that is, it's just really good for us. It's an essential part of life. So I set up Explorers Connect to help people connect, explorers to connect. But over the 14 years, it's evolved. It's always been a not-for-profit, so it's never had a business plan. So it's always had a mission. And the mission has stayed the same, which is to encourage people to live more adventurously. But the way that Explorers Connect has done that is evolved in all sorts of ways over the years. So I've run events, I've run trips, I do courses. And then my biggest life change was I had a little gorgeous boy 5 years ago. And I still love adventure, but I love taking people on adventures. I'm really good at leading adventures, but I only work 2 days a week now. So I'm in that. I've made that massive transition from someone who wanted to be abroad constantly, and I never thought I'd be the person who'd want to, be at home more. But kids change everything. So now I work part time, and I homeschool my son, and I really prioritise my time working and the stuff I love doing, but also family time and family adventures is a big part of that.
Well, so there's so much to unpack there. That's a lot to discuss. If we take a step back, though, how did you get started in it? What was the driving force behind? When I was doing some research about this, about you and this interview, you mentioned some career advice, going to a career advisor and them telling you something that you didn't really sit right with you. So where did it start and what were the first stepping stones?
I'm pretty sure that I started to be an expedition leader or an explorer when I was about 7 years old. And I was really lucky and so fortunate because back then, because I'm 48 now, I'm nearly 47. I shouldn't just about to have my birthday. So that long ago, the world was quite different, and the way kids were brought up was quite different. There was a lot more freedom, I think. And the world was maybe a less scary place. Anyway, that's another discussion. But what I had was this really feral childhood. And I grew up on Alderney, one of the Channel Islands, for a good few years. And there was no stranger danger or hardly any traffic. So I literally could just explore and be free. And I think as a 7, 8, 9-year-old, just rampaging around, the island, freewheeling on my bike. I had a secret garden that I sort of thought that no one else went to, and I would sneak into, and I mean, it was just, I was just free, and the word feral was used a lot, and I think some people would think that's horrifying. Oh gosh, you know, dirty children covered in mud. That's where kids should be, obviously, covered in mud. And so that's really where I think a passion for freedom and adventure came from. And after that, my parents divorced later on down the line. Or separated and later divorced. We moved back to the mainland. We moved to the city. And I lost that connection with adventure, with nature. Also, I was hitting like puberty and that whole, I think teenagers, there's just that time, no matter what start you give a child, they're going to go away from that stuff, probably. You know, there's boys and there's shopping and there's all that silly stuff. But it was ingrained in me. It was always there. So when I heard of the Duke of Edinburgh Award, like this light, actually my friend said a light came on in you, and I just knew I had to do it. And I think without that early start, maybe I wouldn't have done it, but I did the Duke of Edinburgh purely because I wanted to do the expeditions, and it just changed everything again. It reconnected me to adventuring and nature, and it also gave me loads more confidence because I'd had some knocks over that time, and it gave me a fresh lease for life, I think.
And if you were to go back to those earlier memories, because I've been very lucky myself to work in the adventure industry and turn my passion into my profession. And if I'd have turned around to my 10-year-old self and said, look, you're going to be paid to ride your bicycle, you know, later on in your life, I wouldn't even believe you. And I had an interesting time at school and going to a careers advisor, and then they basically told me I need to join the army. That's what I should do with my skills. And I didn't join the army, but I've forged this career in the adventure industry. So what would be a bit of advice for your younger self getting into the life in which you live now?
You also just reminded me, I never even answered your question properly because you asked about that careers advisor. I'll come back to that. I think I would have just said, be kind to yourself and believe in yourself. I think we can be our own worst enemies. And I lived in fear a lot when I was at school. I did well at school, but only because I worked like mad because I was so fearful of failing. And so I don't remember it as a particularly good time. And I wasn't, anyway. But yes, there was this time in this careers advisor who was in the school, one of the teachers, I can't remember who it was, but it was a woman. And I remember this tiny little room that was the careers room. And it was like a box room. And everyone at some age, maybe 14 or something, went in to talk to the careers advisor. And I remember saying to her, I want to be an explorer. And she just practically almost laughed, like you had to hold back a laugh. She said, that's not really a job. I was like, why isn't it? You know, and I'd seen Fiona Campbell, I think, or shortly after that, I saw Fiona Campbell walking around the world. And I thought, actually, women can do this as well. It's not just guys with beards. And I was like, I want to do that. Anyway, she basically said, you can't do that. You know, let's talk about something sensible. And I don't know. I've always remembered that because I did go along with things. I was compliant for some time, but thankfully when I was 18, I did my Duke of Edinburgh Award. That gave me a completely new doorway into confidence. I wouldn't say that it totally cured me, it hadn't totally changed my life, but it helped me to change my life because it gave me another direction. And then through doing that, I did more adventurous stuff in Britain, and then I heard about expeditioning and how you could join these expeditions and so on. I raised all the money. I went off to Tanzania and I went off on my first expedition, and I came back a year later completely changed. And I did believe that maybe I couldn't be an explorer, but because I basically been told I couldn't be, but maybe I could do something along those lines. So what I did actually for a good long time was I had a dual career where I was leading on expeditions for all these wonderful youth development expeditions and so on. But also I got into TV because I knew that TV could pay the bills, as it were, because back then it was very hard to make a career full time as an expedition leader. It's much better now. It's brilliant. I mean, there's so much more opportunity now. Even with COVID, and obviously there's been a few bad years, but I think there's so much opportunity now. But yeah, so I did have a dual career because I think for a long time, as far as advice to my younger self, I just didn't quite believe that I was really good enough to do what I really wanted to do. So I kind of hedged my bets. But thankfully, I always kept my foot in this expedition world. And so I was always doing, in my spare time, as it were, expeditions. And then eventually I did so many in my spare time that I became really good at it. And people were offering me work. And I was like, oh, okay. And I kind of, I was kind of able to do a bit of everything.
So it was almost like you were starting the flywheel, and then the flywheel just started. And were you then in a position where you had too much work and you started turning things down?
Yeah, and do you know what? What it made me just actually suddenly remember is, I think the key is to keep going towards things that interest you. Whatever if I was going to give advice to my younger self, or I was going to give advice to my older self, or to anyone else, it's like, we're here to live. We're here to enjoy life. And make a difference and help people and love people and all of that other stuff as well. But really, why are we here unless we're here to do things that we are interested in, that bring us alive, that are wonderful and joyful? So if you keep following things that are joyful to you, that are interesting and excite and engage you, then you can never go wrong. So I never had an exact plan, but I just kept picking projects and getting involved with things that I just really believed in, or I just thought would be awesome fun. It was like, or both, preferably. And I think if you do that, you can't go wrong.
Brilliant. That is great advice right there. So you managed to pack all of these things into your life, and you mentioned earlier on you now have a child. I'm sure there are lots of listeners now thinking, how on earth do you fit all of this? And you say you work 2 days a week now, but it hasn't always been the case, has it? So was there a point at which you were just working all of the time, flat out, or have you maintained a nice, healthy balance throughout, do you think?
No, I was, both myself and my partner. My partner's an artist. We both love what we do. So we're both, I think, as much as it's wonderful to do what you love as your job, you can become a bit obsessive and you can become a workaholic. And the wake up call was having a son and going, actually, as much as we love adventuring or painting or whatever, we have to find balance, actually, because I think you can almost have too much of a good thing as well. I was so busy jumping from one project to another. I'd fly in from Borneo, get a phone call and go, can you go to New Zealand in 2 weeks' time to take a film crew and do this? And it is wonderful. And I shouldn't moan about it, but actually, if you never stop to smell the roses, it's too much. It all becomes too much. And so I finally feel like I've got balance, which has taken having a child to actually get there. So no, I was a complete workaholic. I can't remember exactly what the question was, but I love what I do, but you've got to be able to stop back and enjoy it. You've got to be able to take time. You've got to find balance. And the thing about my adventure job was that I was always abroad. So I'd miss weddings, I'd miss friends' birthdays, I'd miss our anniversaries, I'd miss Christmases, all sorts of stuff. And also maybe you become more experienced and more in demand, because obviously when you first start out, you're just trying to get any work you can. You're building up your contacts base. Adventure is such a contacts based, and so is television, because I worked in the two, adventure TV and naturalistic TV. Everything's about who you know. All your work comes from people that you've worked with or their friends, and they go, oh, so and so gave me your number. So you're always, it's a real push at the beginning, and also once you're on the merry-go-round, you worry that if you get off and take a break, that you might not, as a freelancer, you might not get, everyone might forget about you or something. And then once you become much more in demand, because you've got decades behind you, you realise that you can turn down jobs and have a couple of months off if you've got the, if you can make ends meet. You can say no to projects that you know are going to be 18-hour days for crazy amounts of time. And you can just find, I don't know, or maybe it's just becoming a mum and realising that relationships are actually the most, even more than adventure, relationships are the most important thing.
Absolutely, yeah. So you've managed to find the time as well to write a book and publish a book, Adventure Revolution. Give us an overview of what that book means to you and what people can find in it.
Yeah. So I think maybe it's partly, well, actually, no. How did it all start? It started so long ago, I don't even know where to begin. For years, I saw people transforming. And for me, I'd had a difficult second part of my childhood, and I had really low self-esteem, and adventuring transformed me, and it gave me confidence, and it allowed me to find what I was capable of and to hope for a better future than I think I was when I was a sort of early teenager. And so it was transformational for me. And then over 20 odd years of taking people on adventures and seeing these transformations again and again, it was like, it's not just me. Like, adventure is this really wonderful opportunity for people to live their best lives, to find their skills, to find who they are, to find what they're, to find out how to live life in the best way. And I was like, why don't we talk about that? Why don't we appreciate adventure that way? We always, and actually a lot of the science, because I started to try and do some research into it, and a lot of the research was into, adventurous activities almost done by weirdos who want to risk takers, who want to risk their lives jumping out of planes and stuff. And it's not, that's not what adventure is for me. It's like there was a whole narrative that wasn't out there. And so I did a lot over the years. I worked with youth adventure charities and anyone who's worked with these organisations, or most people who work in the outdoors, in fact, will see what adventure does for people. It helps people of all ages. And I saw this time and again, and I just wanted it to, I wanted to understand it. That was first. So I did loads of research into psychology, evolutionary psychology, tourism research, outdoor education, adventure education research. And I read hundreds of papers. I read there's an adventure therapy book. So I read that sort of thing. But there's some great stuff out there. But there wasn't a narrative out there that was saying, look, this is an essential part of life. If you want to have good well-being, adventure is actually a really good key. So Adventure Revolution was the culmination of 25 years of leading groups and seeing transformations, and about 10 years of researching why adventure works for us. And then I asked loads of scientists to write the book because I've had imposter syndrome. And eventually I over lockdown, I was like, I've talked about this book for years and how it needs to exist. I'm just going to write it. I've got all this research. I've got loads of stories of people transforming like butterflies in front of my eyes. And I work with some really amazing scientists, a guy called Alan Hewitt, who's a bit of a legend over in Pennsylvania, and other wonderful scientists to help advise me on it. So it's all very accurate. But it's essentially the first book now that explains the psychology of why adventure is essential for our well-being. And it's lots of adventure stories. So it's a popular science book. So it's not written for scientists. It's written for everybody. But it is peppered with this really in-depth science that is distilled, hopefully, into really digestible amount of science that underlines it all and is the key through it, because without a solid argument, it wouldn't hold up. And so what I wanted to do with it is, it's called Adventure Revolution because it's calling for a revolution in our society, to rebrand adventure as essential for our well-being and something that we need to have in our schools, in our urban planning, in our everyday lifestyles, in our, everywhere. It's important. So yeah, I'm very passionate about the book.
I can tell.
A message that needs to be out.
Absolutely it does. And we see adventure sometimes on Netflix and on the television and in various media channels, and often it's portrayed as that the one that's on recently about Nim's Die, the one he did in the Himalaya. And is that do you see that those sorts of adventure documentaries and such, are they a really positive thing? Are they going to instigate change? Because for me, I see something like that and I think there's no way I'm ever going to be able to do something like that. So what are the stepping stones then, do you think? And who is this book sort of aimed at, in terms of, you want to take someone who doesn't have any adventure in their life to take those first steps? So what do you hope people will take from the book in that respect?
Yeah, a really clear message in the book is that there's a space in all of our lives for big adventure, but also for small adventure. I think those big adventures that we see on the telly or whatever, or read about, they're important because they're inspirational and they do have value. But I think more people, or most people, enter adventure actually by seeing other people doing smaller adventures because it seems more accessible. So the inspirational level is absolutely important, because we should all be, at some point, we all want to look up. We all want to cast our eyes up to the summit or whatever. But the small adventures are accessible. They're they're affordable. They feel like something you can fit in. So a lot of the advice in the end of the book is about how you can just get into adventures, and that it's not. You can do everyday adventures. You can do something from your doorstep. It's not. You don't have to save up for 6 months and then disappear for 3 months, and it costs you a fortune. And actually, I think we are more inspired by people closest to us doing these things than we are by people on the TV or people far removed from us. When someone in your family or a friend or a colleague goes and cycles John O'Groats to Land's End or something like that, that is, if they can do that, maybe I can do that. It's much easier to connect and to put yourself in their shoes. But the TV, but the big inspirational stuff is great as well. And I think actually we need small adventures to keep our sanity. Well, I know I do, to keep healthy, to keep sane, to just have a good life. But I think we all have big transitional points in our lives, whether it be, growing up, becoming an adult. That is a really important time for a big adventure. Maybe retiring, changing career, having children for the first time, becoming parents for the first time, divorce, marriage, whatever. These big turning points in your life, it's good to step away from your everyday, immerse yourself in something else, rethink who you are, find out who you are, and then will come back with new skills, or come back with a new version of yourself. Because we evolve, as people, we evolve. So, and life changes us, and we, in good and bad ways, good and bad things happen, but we change. So I think, small adventures are key, but don't forget that some big challenges, they're life-defining moments as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And on top of your book, on top of Explorers Connect and all of those other things, you also have a conference, the Adventure Mind conference. What could people expect about as a visitor to the Adventure Mind? It's in November, is that right? The next one.
So Adventure Mind is a network of researchers, outdoor leaders, outdoor therapists and coaches, all sorts of people who might use adventure for wellbeing. It's a conference for people who are interested in using adventure for improving people's wellbeing. So it's a network. There's a Facebook group and a LinkedIn group. I did the first conference just before COVID, and then obviously everything shut down and everything went on hold. We had loads of plans. We had the next conference last November. We've got another one coming in this November. The conference is about getting people together, because there's nothing quite like spending a couple of days together with like-minded people who, to try and, we're all trying to do the same thing, essentially. But all sorts of people from different industries or using different techniques or whatever. But the whole point of Adventure Mind is to promote this idea that adventure is good for us. Adventure is really good for our mental health, our well-being, and that we need to get that message out. So it's also it's a conference, it's a network, and it's also now a network of researchers. I have these amazing professors and researchers from different parts of the globe that are working together to my book was a starting place, I suppose, but these are the real experts. They're going to take it on another level. So these guys are putting together the resources whereby outdoor professionals or therapists or researchers, psychologists can access really easily, really easy to access, but also really easy to communicate resources that will explain why adventure is good for well-being. This will help practitioners like an outdoor leader access really good data so that they can explain. It's everything from explaining and writing an impact report as to why they're taking young people kayaking. They can see, ask any outdoor instructor who takes young people kayaking, they can see that it's helping them with confidence and resilience and all the rest of it. But sometimes they need the data, they need the scientific, like the wording or just the depth of research in the background, so they can say, here's the research that shows that taking kayaking improves a child's resilience by 25%. And what we're trying to do is, this amazing team of very clever people are collating this information and putting it out. We'll be putting it out on the Adventure Mind website. But Adventure Mind is, it's a mission again. It's a mission to promote this idea. And I'm trying to get people to help me do it, because I can't do it all on my own. And so I've got these wonderful scientists. We're a team of volunteers at the moment. I'm trying to get a brand or a really good organisation to help, like, take it on board or to get behind it. Or I don't know. The important thing is it happens. So I'm not sure how that's going to go. But there's lots of amazing people interested in helping, and there's lots of progress. There's been an amazing reaction. Even more so since COVID. But I suppose since COVID, we've had an even worse mental health situation in this country. I mean, we have horrifying statistics. 1 in 6 children at the moment is diagnosed with a mental health disorder. 1 in 6 children. Goodness. And that's a diagnosis. I know. So if you think, if that's just the kids diagnosed, that's another, probably double that, are actually suffering in some way. It's from the stresses of and I think at that point you have to say, well, what's wrong with the kid? And stop saying what's wrong with the kid. You have to say, what's wrong with our society? What are we doing wrong that we are leaving our children to such to such a position, to such a state? 1 in 6 kids. I mean, it's horrifying. We're one of the worst in Europe for mental health amongst children, but I think possibly amongst adults as well. I haven't looked at all the recent stats, but anyway, we're in a crisis.
Yeah. I again, when I was preparing for this interview, you've launched a YouTube channel for the Adventure Mind, haven't you? And you've got the a video of your introductory talk. And I mean, I'd recommend watching that video anyway. But if nothing else, just for the photo of you and your son with the rucksack, that is magical. That is some photo. So I'd recommend people go and check that out. It really sounds like, Belinda, that you've got all of these things and everything, your ducks are in a row and that everything's rosy, and I'm sure there've been bumps along the way. And what I try to do with these podcasts is give people the highlight reel of how good it is to work in the adventure industry and how many opportunities there are. But there are inevitably so many different bumps, so many mistakes, so many things that you look back and go, why did I do that? So I'm interested to know, do you have any of those that's sort of glaring out that you think, I should have done that differently? I learned from it, but that was, let's not call it a mistake, but a bit of a bump.
I think you can't get anywhere without making mistakes. I don't know if there's been one. I think there's just been loads, really. I think what I'm trying to do, I set up Explorers Connect because I wanted to create a community of people who would inspire each other to go and adventure. And I was only early on in my research at that time about why adventure is good for us, but I could see that it was good for us. So I was like, share these transformational stories and so on, but try and create opportunities. But what I tried to do with Explorers Connect is do everything myself. I would literally work from dawn till dusk. I'd just be absolutely throw myself into it. It has to work. This is so important. Why aren't people, this could be so cool. This is so exciting. And there were so many ups. I've got so many friends. I've had so many wonderful experiences through it. But I was absolutely flogging myself to make it work. And once I had a child and I had to step back and I tried to pass on all these things, although I had amazing teams working for me at different times, I mean, brilliant people, but I was still always holding everything together. I was like the core of everything because it was my passion. Whereas what I'm trying to do with Adventure Mind is approach it very differently and just try and let as many people help run it from as early on as possible and hand off things. Because Explorers Connect and Adventure Mind, to me, exactly so, I just want to see them existing and doing well in the world. I don't have to be the core of it. And so I can't be the core of it this time. So I have to say, look, I'm not very good at asking people for help, even though I'll work for free all the time, or for different charities that I support, or for the stuff that I've done. And I know that I'm working way more than I'm ever getting paid for. I'm not very good at asking other people to do it. So I've gotten much better at saying, because people do want to be involved with stuff that matters, that they believe in, just like I do. So I don't know why I just sort of, I don't know, some sort of embarrassment. I don't want to ask people to do more than I would do. Anyway, so I just, balance is everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But loads of mistakes. I'd be here all day if I was talked about all the things I messed up.
Yeah, ditto. Yeah, it's a long and bumpy journey. Well, it's an adventure. Yeah, absolutely. Belinda, I want to be respectful of your time. As you know, at the end of the podcast, I always ask, I guess, 3 questions. So I guess we sort of touched on this at the beginning of the interview, but I'm going to be a bit more specific about it. So what piece of advice would you give to yourself 10 years ago? We talked about advice that you give yourself as a child, but advice to give yourself 10 years ago, because you've gone through so many different manifestations of what is, your career and what everything means to you. So 10 years ago, very specific, go for it.
I've only got quite a short answer, sorry.
That's right.
I think it's just, the main thing is just that it's okay to evolve. It's okay to let go of things. It's okay to move into a new chapter. I've been so passionate. I've very rarely worked on anything that I'm not really passionate about. So sometimes it's really hard to move on to something else. But if you really want to do that new thing, you have to shut doors. You have to carry on. I had to close down. I used to run Basecamp Festival. It's one of the first adventure festivals. There's quite a few around now, which is great. I don't have to run mine, but I loved running it. But I had to, with my son and going part-time, and I had to just get rid of things. I had to say that it's had its golden age, and it's if I can't do it anymore. I've got to do, if I want to do Adventure Mind, I've got to shut other things off. If I want to spend time with my son, I've got to stop doing other things. So it's okay to evolve. And evolving means stopping things or closing down things or, shutting doors on things. Otherwise, you'll never have the space for the new stuff. And I love new challenges. I think adventure to me is a key part of it, is challenge. And that I think I can't progress, I can't evolve, I can't do new things if I'm constantly weighed down by the old stuff. Not that you throw everything out, but it's a balance.
Yeah, there's only so many hours in the day. Sorry. So yeah,
there is.
Yeah. Great. Question 2 then. What valuable resource, so it could be a book, YouTube channel, piece of equipment, blog, podcast, app or other, can you recommend to help others following a similar path to you?
I kind of think we've done that one as well, because I would say if you're interested in adventure and well-being, if you're someone who works as an outdoor professional, you will probably already feel that adventure or the outdoors is important for us. And the nature debate is already there, and it's brilliant. Nature is important for us, but I think choosing challenge in nature, choosing challenge outside is this idea of adventure is the other part. So I would say, obviously, my book, because that explains it all. It's the book I wish I'd had 2 decades ago. It would have helped me, I think. Also, all the resources, Adventure Mind resources will be there, but at the moment it's Adventure Mind Facebook group and LinkedIn group. It's all free to join. It'll all be free to access, because it needs, or not the conference. You have to pay to come to that.
Yeah.
But all of these resources will be out there. So,
fabulous. Great. And the final question then: what would you like to see change about the adventure industry?
Loads of things in some ways, but I think overall I would like to see it valued in a different, just truly valued. I think it was really interesting during COVID, and it's always, and also if you look at over the last 20 years, what have they been shutting down? Where's the funding gone from? I don't think adventure or the outdoors industry is valued. And that's part of the mission of Adventure Mind and Burke and everything. Is just like, this is really important. We need this. We need this for ourselves, for our families, and this for our society.
Yeah.
And for that, I think lots of things. People need to be paid better. And also, there's a real staff retention problem that people are noticing at the moment, which is really interesting. Talking to friends who still run a lot of adventure organisations, and it's not just the money, which is hard if you're trying to be a professional adventure leader and you're trying to if you want to buy a house or if you just be a grown up, have kids and stuff in the future. It's really, really obviously poorly paid, but it's also, I think there's a lot of staff retention problem because there's either a lack of support or there's a lack of training, or there's some reason that a lot of young people in the industry now are leaving, and they're because of stress. Stress is what's the main reason. And I'm hearing this in America, colleagues in America as well as in Britain. It's not just in Britain. And I think, it's also because we're obviously all terrified of being sued the whole time and blamed. Mm. If there's this, society's gone really wrong. It's gone really down the wrong road. And I think, and that's why the outdoors and adventure is so undervalued. And how do we do that? That's a bigger question. I don't know. But yeah. I think the main thing is we need it to be better funded, better supported, better respected, and it's a essential part of our society.
And like you, I grew up definitely outside all of the time, and I went on school trips to outdoor centres, and that has absolutely shaped my life. And yet you're absolutely right, outdoor centres are closing down left, right and centre, and it is one of the first things to get axed. It is absolutely criminal. And your book obviously sheds a lot of light on those issues, so thank you very much for providing that to the world. Great stuff. Well, I think we're going to sign off there. Thank you so much for your time, Belinda. And where can people find out more about you and what's going on? What are the specific web addresses for those of people that are just listening?
Well, explorersconnect.com, belindakirk.com is how you can contact me. I do a bit of social media, balanced, in a balanced way. That's Explorer Belinda, but also Explorers Connect if you're looking for teammates, and there's cool things there that you can find. And at some point soon, later this year, there'll be an Adventure Mind dedicated website and so on, a newsletter and so on that will be sharing these free resources, but not sure when that will happen. Hopefully by the end of the year.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again for sharing your life and your mission. I'm almost certain people will be in touch soon. So thanks again, Belinda. Bye-bye.
Cheers, Tom. Thanks.
If you've enjoyed this podcast and want to hear the next one, please subscribe. Please share the podcast with your friends and followers. You can also find the Adventure Pro podcast on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook @AdventureProPod.